By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. So said Benjamin Franklin. So on today's video, I want to talk about this idea of preparation and is there such a thing as over preparing? Now, I would argue that there is, and I would also argue that there is a sweet spot between over preparing and not preparing. And that's where you want to be, because that's where you're most authentic, most powerful, and most expressive. But the biggest mistake I see with public speakers and also singers, actually, but this channel is really aimed at speaking, is people think if they prepare enough, then they'll feel safe. Then they won't mess up. Then they won't look stupid. But all that happens is the more you over prepare, the more anxiety you actually create. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, and also what you can do instead. Like, how do you find this sweet spot? But before I get going, my name is Anuska Taylor. I'm an experienced voice coach, Jungian depth coach using the profound work of Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung. And I'm also a singer, songwriter, and performer. So everything I share in my videos, I am walking my talk. I put this into practice myself every day, whether I'm speaking, whether I'm singing. So I'm coming at everything I share with you from lived experience and also my years of training speakers and singers. But my whole philosophy with the voice is it's an outer expression of your inner world, both what you're conscious of and, more importantly, what you're unconscious of, which is why often our voices don't make sense and they seem to have a mind of their own. So if you're interested in a deeper transformation, learning more about yourself in the process, it's a personal transformation, which then really drives the voice externally, then I would love to speak to you. I have my 8-month private voice coaching program, Speak with Impact, which you can book a consult if you'd like to find out more about that, or you can just book a one-off 60-minute private voice session below. But all the links are in the description box under this video. And also, if you like my videos, please don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, share, all the good stuff. So first of all, let's talk about over preparation. And if you go on social media, particularly on places like LinkedIn, it's always talking about prepare, 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 rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. That's how you become a great speaker. So I understand to some extent, yes, you do need to rehearse. Yes, you do need to prepare. I'm not saying that you don't, but there is a sweet spot. So what happens if you over prepare? And this is something that I see a lot, as I say, with people new to public speaking, because it gives them a sense of safety, but it's actually an illusory sense of safety because I think it creates more anxiety, more stress, and more fear. So when we over prepare, there's a lack of flexibility and adaptability in our presentation, in our speech, in our podcast, whatever it is we're doing. So it's very rigid. I have to say these words in this particular order. If not, I am completely thrown off. It's overly focused on detail and you're often speaking verbatim. So yes, in certain circumstances, particularly as an actor, you might need to do this, but usually for public speaking, you don't need to be doing this. And actually, it's really limiting you because it creates more anxiety. Because if you forget a line, if you forget a particular word that you thought to yourself, I must say that, I must get that line in, that paragraph in. If you don't remember to say it, it's going to throw you off completely. You're going to lose your place in what you're saying. So it creates more anxiety, more fear, more stress, and you're more and more in your head, which means you're more disconnected to yourself and you're more disconnected to your audience. So this idea of being over prepared is very much driven from fear. It's about not wanting to look stupid, not wanting to mess up. It's very much about what other people will think, because you can never deliver at your best when you're in that very rigid place of over preparation. Now, the other side of the coin, obviously, is not preparing, and I'm not suggesting that you don't prepare. So let's talk about this sweet spot now between over preparing, which we've discussed actually isn't very helpful, and not preparing, which also isn't very helpful. You want some level of preparation. So the first thing, of course, is you want to know your material. You want to know your content. You want to have that core knowledge down. So as a singer, that means I would know my songs inside out. I would know the structure. I'd know the lyrics. I'd know musically roughly where I'm going. in the verses and the choruses and the bridges, etc. As a speaker, you would have a structure roughly of the points you want to cover. So you would have that down, but you would also just have a very good broad knowledge of your topic. Now, there might be specific data points that you need to get across, facts, figures, numbers, etc., maybe keywords. So you might want to note those down. But as a general rule, you're just focused on having a core understanding of your topic or your content. Now, what does this give you? Well, it gives you flexibility. It gives you adaptability. And more importantly, it's more authentic. You can be more creative. You can respond to the situation, to the moment. Maybe someone asks you a question. Maybe something happens in the room that you weren't expecting. Maybe a fire alarm goes off or something happens. So you can respond to the moment. So you're more creative, you are more spontaneous, and you're more in a state of flow, and you can respond to the moment. You are very present. This is way more authentic because you are in your body and you're present with the moment than when you're in your head trying to memorize lines, trying to speak verbatim a presentation or pitch that you've learned in your head. So how can you prepare for this then? How can you find this sweet spot? Well, assuming that you now know your content, that you've got this core knowledge sort of embodied, now it's about having a rough structure of your presentation or pitch or whatever it is that you're doing. So maybe, let's say for the sake of argument, you've got 4 key themes or points that you want to make. So you might want to jot those down on a bit of paper and have them in front of you. There's nothing wrong with that. Just actually as a point, this is how I do my videos. I have some key points, but I'm never reading off a script. I know roughly what I want to say. I have key points that I want to cover, but then I very much just speak off the cuff and trust that what comes through is what you need to hear. So have those key bullet points, those key ideas that you want to get across. This will also help you structure your presentation as well. So you have a beginning, middle, and end. And then, really important, practice improvising around each of those key points. So rather than learning verbatim, okay, this is what I'm going to say to introduce my video, my pitch, my presentation, just practice improvising around your welcome or your intro, whatever the key point is for you, and go through each point and improvise around it. Now, this is what we do as musicians. You know, we have a structure to a song. I know what the lyrics are, but I never sing a song exactly the same way every single time. It might change slightly, but within a structure. So I can respond to how I'm feeling in that moment. So this is what I really want you to start to get. It's practicing improvisation. And we practice it in a safe environment at home where we feel safe. And then when you are in a situation where you're feeling nervous and you've got an audience of people staring at you, then you are less anxious because now you're used to just speaking off the cuff. And you're so confident in your material, you've got that knowledge down, that you can just improvise around each of those topics. So the first one is improvisation. Practice improvising around each point. The other point, which won't be a surprise to you, is always make sure your voice is prepared. Now, this might mean that you need some voice training. If you are not using your voice in an optimal way, if your voice is being pulled back into your throat, if you've got no power, if you struggle to project, if you can't articulate clearly, if your voice is very nasal, if you run out of breath easily, if you speak really fast and you can't slow down, then you probably want to consider some voice training. Because if you don't, then you go into these environments, you are going to feel incredibly nervous. Because not only now have you got a script that you're trying to remember, but you've also got a voice that you don't really have a relationship with. So you don't actually trust the voice to deliver the words that you have written in front of you. So now we've got a double whammy of anxiety. So the more you understand your voice, you know how to access your true voice, then you can just let the voice do its job. Let it respond to the emotion, to the environment, to the words, to your audience. So you're not micromanaging your voice, but you can't do that if your voice isn't trained. if you don't know what's going to come out. So we need to train the voice first and foremost. But then when we come to these presentation situations, then we let all that training go and we focus on being present with our material and our audience. So you want to train your voice, and you also want to prepare your voice before you start speaking. So that's a whole other thing, but that would be part of the training. So how do you prepare your voice for speaking? You need to warm your voice up. You need to get things moving. You might want to do some exercises for articulation, for getting the voice forward, etc., for getting the breath really engaged to power the voice, all of that. And it takes time. You know, if you want this to be embodied, where you can just show up and focus on what you're saying, then you need to put the time in ahead of the presentation, not, okay, I've got a presentation tomorrow. What do I do with my voice? What most people do is they don't think about their voice at all. They focus on what they're going to say, and then they fall in a heap because the voice is going to respond to what's going on within. So if you're highly anxious, that's the voice that's going to come out. So train your voice, prepare your voice for speaking, practice improvising around the key points that you want to get across. And this gives you then a structure. So no matter what happens, you follow this structure. And I guarantee you will feel far more confident because you're also going to feel more free. You're not going to feel like you're so restricted and it's so rigid. Just coming back to the music analogy, for me, it's like singing with a backing track versus singing with a live band. So if I sing with a backing track, I have to sing the song exactly to fit that backing track. So I can't deviate at all. I can't do what I want. I'm very much stuck in the rhythm and the structure of that backing track. When I sing with a live band, to some extent, I've got a bit more flexibility and movement, because if I choose to come in a bit later, the band will respond. If I choose to do an extended intro, the band will respond. But you can't do that with a backing track. So it's the same thing. We want to give ourselves the space for creativity, spontaneity, and that flow. And that is where your voice is going to respond. And that is where you are your most authentic when you speak or when you sing. So if you want some help with this, please don't hesitate to book a session below. I'd love to help you. But if you really want that deeper transformation where you really don't have to think about your voice and you can just step out and speak and then just focus on delivering, then I highly recommend my 8-month private voice coaching program, because it's going to transform you from within, and the voice will be a byproduct of you shifting how you feel about yourself at the deepest level. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please do like, comment, and share, and I will see you next week.